Hello, my name is Antonio, and first of all, I would like to thank the organizing committee of Litera for organizing such an interesting event. The title of my presentation is The Linguistics of a Rupture with the Romantic Tradition, Emily Dickinson, Waldo, Emerson, and the Pathetic Fallacy under the eyes of cognitive linguistics. This presentation is organized into 5 main sections. I will begin with a brief introduction and then outline the key theoretical concepts with particular attention to the notion of the pathetic fallacy. I will then move on to the analysis of the poems Snowstorm by Waldo Emerson and Hope is a Thing with Feathers by Emily Dickinson, before concluding with a comparative discussion of the findings. To understand eco-criticism, it's crucial to go back in time to the 60s and to open Silent Spring, the book by Rachel Carson, where she presented an impressive body of scientific evidence against new organic pesticides like DDT. But the book's real power didn't come from the data alone. It came from how that evidence was framed. Carson achieved to embed scientific findings within familiar cultural narratives, making the threat feel urgent, personal, and emotionally resonant. She relied on several key literary tools. First, the pastoral, invoking idealized, harmonious through a past to show what stood to be lost. Second, apocalypse, by framing environmental damage as a final, catastrophic ending rather than a distant or reversible poem. Intertextuality is a key factor, so literary allusion also play a key role. The author Carson echoes young Keats' La Danse à Merci, evoking a blighted, enchanted landscape where Keats writes, "No birds sing." Studying how these rhetorical strategies, literary genres, and cultural frameworks shapes environmental meaning is the work of eco-criticism. So we want to approach literature through the lens of an earth-centered approach, and we should forget the human-centered approach. In eco-criticism, Greg Garber outlined a series of recurring tropes that critics return to frequently. He discusses pollution and environmental damage, ideas of the wilderness, and so-called untouched nature, apocalyptic visions of ecological collapse and dwelling. It means the ways humans live and relate to their environments. Animals, and even the earth itself also play an important role in this framework, reminding us that literature is constantly negotiating the boundary between the human and the non-human. For the purposes of this discussion, we're going to narrow the focus, and we'll concentrate on the pastoral, and more specifically on the use of the pathetic fallacy as key ways texts construct emotional and symbolic relationships between humans and the natural world. The pastoral is one of the most enduring and influential tropes in Western literary culture, and it raises particular problems for environmental thinking. With roots in classical antiquity, it has proven highly adaptable, capable of serving very different political purposes. At the same time, its tension and evasions can make it environmentally misleading by smoothing over conflict or masking the forces that shape human-nature relations. That's why the pastoral is that idea of nature we can't escape, and will be the concept that will be at the very core of our presentation. So let's define the pathetic fallacy. The pathetic fallacy describes nature as if it shares human emotions. For example, mountains sigh, rivers mourn, forests rejoice. While this creates emotional resonance, critics argue it can also sentimentalize or idealize the natural world, reducing via ecological dynamics to human feeling. Nature becomes a mirror for human emotions rather than an active, independent agent, and sometimes it obscures the social or environmental realities behind its changes. Although linguistics and literary studies have traditionally developed along separate paths, they are necessarily interdependent, and the concept of metaphor, this concept provides a crucial bridge between them in the present study. According to Lakoff and Johnson, metaphor is not just an stylistic device, but a cognitive mechanism. Conceptual metaphors work by mapping a concrete familiar domain, and what we call the source domain, onto a more abstract one, known as target domain. A classic example is love is a journey. Elements from the concrete experience of a journey, such as travelers, paths, obstacles, and destinations, are mapped onto the abstract concept of romantic relationship, for example, the lovers, the relationship itself, difficulties, and the outcome. Through these mappings, we understand love in terms of movement, progress, difficulty, and direction. In this way, conceptual metaphors structure how we think, reason, and make sense of abstract experiences, and that's why it's so important in literary studies. And we're going to apply this concept to our corpus. Before introducing the corpus, let me briefly consider the authors who comprise it. Understanding their ideas and context will help us better grasp the texts and the perspectives they present. Emerson is widely celebrated as a central figure in the emergence of America's natural culture. While many of his contemporaries remain intellectually dependent on European tradition, Emerson advocated for a new culture founded on direct contact with nature. His ideas encourage Americans to develop a distinct self-reliant cultural identity. And now let's move on to the following author, who is Emily Dickinson. According to Gilbert Masella, both Emerson and Dickinson are considered romantic writers. Emily Dickinson was born into a prominent family in Amherst and spent 1 year at Mount Holyoke Seminary. Between 1859 and 1865, she composed more than 1,000 poems, with 1863 being her most creative year. Her poetry is notably short and compact, reflecting her preference for brevity and conciseness. This limited use of language was likely a response to the pompous and inflated style that characterized the Civil War period and the subsequent Gilded Age. Now that we have introduced the authors, let's move on to the findings, okay? Please note that the very nature of this study is exploratory, okay? So this analysis shows that Emerson humanizes nature in snowstorm, using the wind and snow as active and almost conscious agents. For instance, he describes the north wind as a fierce artificer who carved his white bastions with projected roof, giving the storm an almost human creativity to express his inner vision. By contrast, Dickinson resists such projection and employs a conceptual metaphor. You remember, love is a journey, okay? In Hope is the thing with feathers. Here, hope is embodied as a bird. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul. The bird does not act like a human. Instead, it conveys an abstract quality, the more than human concept of hope, through a concrete natural image, demonstrating coexistence rather than colonization. Okay, so this contrast highlights a key difference. Emerson projects the self onto nature, while Dickinson maintains a respectful reciprocal relationship. From an ecofeminist perspective, her approach avoids patriarchal frameworks and presents a more ethical interaction with the natural world. So, in conclusion, our analysis suggests that in these 2 points, Emerson tends to project the self onto nature, the pathetic fallacy, while Dickinson emphasizes coexistence with the more than human. Emerson uses the pathetic fallacy, humanizing natural elements, whereas Dickinson employs conceptual metaphor portraying hope through the figure of a bird. An ecofeminist perspective highlights the potential gender dimensions in these literary strategies. Nonetheless, these findings are exploratory given the small size of our corpus and should not be overgeneralized. But future research could expand the study to more texts exploring how male and female authors may differently relate to the more than human, the feminization of nature, and the resistance to patriarchal frameworks in literature. So thank you for listening to my presentation, and of course I want to show my gratitude towards the organizing committee of this conference, literature titled Litera. Thank you, and see you in the conference.